Okay, you're now live.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. It is Thursday, excuse me. I'll get it right yet. Thursday afternoon. This is the Committee on Administration meeting for the County of Dunn. And I'm going to call the roll. Supervisor Sheila Story.
Here.
Supervisor Tim Minot.
Here.
Supervisor Dave Bartlett.
Here.
Supervisor John Calabrese.
Here.
Supervisor Jim Tripp.
Here.
I am board chair, committee chair, Vaughn Hedlund, along with our supervisor members. We have Paul Miller, our county manager. Chris Devine is hosting this for our IT department. We have Heather Murray, Julie Waukee, Dan Dunbar, Keith Stray, and Nick Lang, and we have just been joined by Sarah Benedict, all members of the staff here in Dunn County. Our first order of business is approval of our last meeting minutes. That meeting took place January 28th of 2021. Do I have a motion for the minutes?
Supervisor Story.
Motion by Jim Tripp, second by Sheila.
That was
Okay. Any questions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor of the minutes from January 28th, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Krista, do we have any public comment?
No public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move right into item 5 on our agenda, and staff reports. We received reports from all the staff members in writing. Anyone have any questions for any of the reports that were presented by our staff members?
Mr. Chair, I do.
Okay, Tim?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Paul, I see item number 4. It says on your report, it says creating and distributing a report on the upcoming redistricting process. When might we might see that information?
I distributed it at the staff level, but that will be on the executive committee. And of course, all supervisors get the executive committee packet. So it'll go out in the March executive.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'd be interested in seeing it.
Yes, it is interesting this year in particular.
All right.
Thank you, Tim. Anybody else that has any questions about any of the staff reports?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Mr. Tripp.
I've got a question for Heather Murray, and it's actually not part of her report, but the question has to do with the hiring list from the Sheriff's Department. The Judiciary and Law Committee just was requested to toss out the old list so that we can start a new list. And I was wondering if HR, are you involved in that at all, or is that strictly the Civil Service Commission and the Sheriff's Office?
No, they run all of that through us. So twofold, we're working to reduce to writing what that procedure actually looks like, and then also get myself and then our staff up to speed on what the Law Enforcement Standards Board expects from a recruitment standpoint, because it's a little bit different. And we're working closely with the Sheriff's Office to accomplish that. So we're actively involved and partner with them.
Can you the sheriff wasn't, well, maybe I didn't ask the question very well, but I was trying to get at, how long is this list active? How is it composed? I know that the Civil Service Rating Commission interviews candidates for the Sheriff's Department, and I'm just a little bit unclear. And I should have done this better at the Judiciary and Law meeting, but if you can help me out here a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
Let me do some research. Those are the things that we're trying to look into, so I can only speak from my past experience and how we had it set up. I can tell you that, at times you have to expire the list sooner because you run out of people on the list. At times you extend the list until you have a new list. So we're still getting ourselves familiar with that and working with the sheriff's office on that, but I can certainly look all of that up for you and get back to you on what that looks like.
Great, I'd appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you, Jim. Anything else, Jim?
I have one quick question regarding Keith. He gave us a list of bullet points on the Finance Division monthly report. Third one down on the list, or the second one down on the list, it was fixed asset implementation setup issues negatively impacting audit reports and financial statements. I was just wondering if he could elaborate on that a little bit more.
Sure thing. Happy to do that. One of the multitude of things that we've had to address since transition from our initial consultant to Phoenix, our current consultant, was to do an assessment and address a number of implementation concerns and challenges. And one of the things that occurred during implementation was fixed assets were just essentially placed into accounts, and in some cases just I'll call it a plug number was put in place, never truly reconciled. And then the audit firm and staff would have to work together every year and do manual adjustments. And the system was supposed to be set up that we didn't have to do that. So we've been doing that, like a number of various things were having to be completed with workarounds and just all this additional manual work that shouldn't be done with a system like this, even much less expensive systems. So as we've been going through this year, we've been working on those. Basically, it's an onion. Every layer we peel, there's more things to work on. We're getting very close to having gone through the most significant implementation issues, and this is one of the last ones. So what I mean by negatively impacting it is we're nowhere near as efficient with year-end processes and closing as we should be if the system had been set up initially the way it should have been.
Okay. Like I say, when it says negatively impacting, you caught my attention.
Sure. No, and that's, I mean, it wasn't trying to be flashy, but it was just being factual. And that's partly what is slowing us down in some of the financial reporting initiatives that County Manager Miller and I have talked about, because we need to address these issues before we can do that.
All right. It just caught my eye, so I figured I'd ask.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Anyone else? Supervisor Tripp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I have a question for Julie Wothke in the county clerk's office. Mentioned in your report a number of things that the Joint Legislative Audit Committee is looking at the past election. And it has struck me that elections have changed. We get a lot more absentee requests, et cetera. Is there something from your office or you personally that you would like to see remedied in state law regarding elections that the county might add to our legislative agenda for sharing with the state legislature? Go ahead. I'm just going to let you answer me here.
I don't know that there's anything that would be needed to add to the legislative agenda. My association as a group is working on some things to present with the counties association. I think a lot of the audit has to do with the indefinitely confined voters. And they're actually, yesterday, there was all kinds of legislation introduced to close up those loopholes, and that would take care of it. There was, I think, about 6 or 7 bills issued yesterday, some good, some not so good. I haven't had time to vet them all, but as far as the audit goes, it's more a forensic look at procedures, security. I anticipate that there will be a representative coming to see how we secure ballots, possibly look at some of those envelopes, which are all retained in my vault. So it won't require us to do anything other than to grant them access to view and look at our procedures. And I'm sure they will speak with municipal clerks as well as how their procedures, because they would have all the applications and things like that on file. But I don't know if that answers your question or not, but.
Well, it does. And what I'd like to request is that if your Clerks Association and or WCA decide to come down on one side or another of an issue, if you could keep us informed of that, I'd appreciate it, because it
Absolutely.
just seems to me that there's probably some modifications, some cleaning up, some clarification of language that would be beneficial before the next big election.
Absolutely. And actually, our association had asked for a lot of clarification on some of those issues prior to the 2020 presidential election, and the legislatures just never acted on them. So I don't know if that adds.
Just one last comment. I know you've seen the letter that made its rounds to the supervisors regarding the Dominion voting system. So just want to share with you that one of the resources for the conclusions in that letter came from the My Pillow Guys video. So I didn't take it very seriously. I'm sorry about that, I guess. Anyway, thank you, Julie.
You're welcome.
Vaughn, I have another question for Julie, if I may.
Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah. Julie, at the bottom of your report, there were 4 bullet points. And the last one, it said general election complaints filed with the commission and the clerks and how they were addressed. Did we have any complaints for Dunn County?
I am not aware of any. All the complaints would need to be registered with the Elections Commission, and they have not brought any to my attention in Dunn County. So,
okay, thank you. And Vaughn, I have one more question for Sarah. On the, would be the 3rd bullet point down. They were talking about over 350,000 is earmarked for the project to address emergency and transitional housing needs of the low-income residents. Is that for just our county? That 350,000?
Yes, it is, which is just fantastic. And so that'll be a combination of hotel vouchers and then help with transitional housing, like up to 6 months of rental assistance. And we're going to have the priority of service for people that are actively engaged in criminal justice programs. So it's going to be just fantastic. And then the rest is just open up to low income individuals. So it's going to make a huge difference here in Dunn County.
Wow. Okay. I just wanted clarification there. Thank you very much. That's all.
Thank you, Tim.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else have questions for any of the staff reports?
I ran into one more for Nick. Is he available?
Yes.
Nick is here.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
On one of these REM foreclosure property sales, fourth paragraph down, it just said the driveway and the house were located almost entirely on the neighboring property.
Yes.
Is that for real?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it
And
was
so-
a residence that was I'm pretty sure was built without any zoning permit or building permit or anything like that, and it was built incorrectly. It was built on the neighbor's property. They never really marked the boundary line. I talked to the neighbor about it, and And he said they just stood out on the highway and kind of guessed where the line was. And I think that was the basis for it. So.
Not exactly an accurate survey then, right?
Right. Yeah. And then in order to sell the property, we had to remove the, it's a really a big legal issue, a cloud on title and a zoning problem. And so we just removed it. The highway department went out there with the big equipment and took it down and put it all in a dumpster. And then they moved the culvert and the driveway to the north in order to put everything onto the property.
Okay. Anyway, I just, that caught my eye and I thought, oh my goodness, is that for real? Anyway, that's all.
Thanks again, Tim. Any other comments or questions? Okay, item 5B on our agenda is human resource topics. Heather, did you have some stuff you want to present to us there, or just the reports themselves?
There were a couple of extra reports, but the biggest one that I wanted to at least bring to your attention, which was in the reports, but we had a review of the health insurance plans. Actually, we were looking, I was working on some of the wellness components that we've talked about over the last couple of months and when we were going through renewal. And it came up that one of the health insurance plans did not meet the IRS standards, that the amounts were too high for maximum out of pocket for in-network coverages. So what I can tell you for sure right now is Medica made the adjustment retroactive to January 1. So those plans have been adjusted. What I didn't know at the time that I had typed up the report was all of the steps that we need to take. And I don't know all of them. We're still working through it all. So I'll have a much more thorough report next month. But we are going to run another special open enrollment so that if that change impacted anybody's decision or they want to switch from one plan to another, they can do so. So we're working on pulling together the open enrollment documents, putting together educational meetings, and then also, which wasn't included in the report, but I found out since then, EBC runs our flexible spending accounts. And with COVID, there is an opportunity to make some changes to that plan. So we're going to open up that open enrollment period as well at the same time. So again, I'll have a much more thorough report next month. We believe we're going to have some internal documents that it'll impact. All of the SBCs are going to need to be re-rolled out. The team is working on pulling all of that together, and I'll be able to give you more final results of what that impact was to HR and to the organization next month. The other report that is in there is the equity comp adjustment per the ordinance. We do need to report that. Paul did approve the Dustin Binder equity comp adjustment, and those details were in the packet as well. So,
And then the other one is the LTE positions that have been extended beyond 3 months, which is another reporting requirement from staff to this committee.
yes, and we've been giving those to you quite regularly with COVID, and it's primarily the health department. So we're still continuing to see that. Fortunately, we're seeing that shift from contact tracers now to vaccinators, and how we're going to get vaccines out. So that is a bit of good news. So our LTEs that hopefully you'll start to be seeing over the next few months will be for vaccinations rather than contact tracing due to positives. So.
All right, any questions for Heather about any of those basically 3 different reports that you presented to us?
Dave Bartlett.
David? Go ahead, David.
Along with the equity compensation adjustment for Dustin, it seems like we've been looking at other positions too in the pay. Is this something that we should be looking at countywide? It just seems like we've gotten behind, even though we did a big increase about 3 years ago, I believe it was. But anyway, it just seems like we're having more and more of these, and so I'm wondering if if we should be considering doing some sort of a study. I don't know that we need to spend all that money to do a study, but you guys are the experts to tell us. It just seems like we're getting to that point that maybe we should be looking at the whole county system again.
So Supervisor Bartlett, I think you've been reading my mind. Or later, I did request a carryover or carry forward funds from last year's budget, unspent funds to this year for that compensation study. And in hopes and anticipation that you all would support that. We did start the RFP, which we can cancel if the carry forward funds are not approved. But if we wait until March for the RFP, that sets us back a few months. I would agree with Supervisor Bartlett. We are at a point where I think we need to try and move that along. You guys had started that actually with Joe when she was here, and then we put it on hold, and then COVID put it on hold even further. And so it's really been delayed about 3 or 4 years now. And so I do think it's time, and I wanted to just make sure that that process kept going. So did that answer your question? Okay.
Good. Anything else? David, do you have anything else, Dave? That take care of it? Okay. Any other questions for Heather? Okay, seeing or hearing none, we're down to 6 consideration for actions to be taken by the committee itself on here today. And the first one is for the year 2020 budget carry forward request. And Heather already alluded to the fact that she's got a big pile in the mix here, so to speak. Mr. Miller, do you want to speak to those?
I'll defer to our CFO.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In your packet, you got the memo from me. I put together a combined Department of Administration grouping of requests. Human Resources Department, as you mentioned, requested $72,200 in carry forwards. $7,200 of that is for FMLA source project to do FMLA processing. And the second one, as we just talked about, for the comp and class study. The second request is $24,192 for health insurance fund. It's contributed dollars from Medica for a county employee wellness initiative. These are the unspent funds. So it's really just to move that money forward for the intended use. And then the third request is for statutory money that's collected for land information. And it's carrying that money forward for the intended uses under the restrictions of the statutes. So we've reviewed all these requests, and they are presented to you for your recommendation to the executive committee.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion that we approve the carry forwards?
So moved, Tim Leno.
Thank you, Supervisor Leno. Any second to that? Seconded by Chairman Dave Bartlett. Thank you, David. Any discussion or questions about any of those carry forward projects or amounts? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Passes. We will proceed with the carry forward recommendations. Next item is directional plan recommendation. And Paul, you had a good summary for that. Would you like to present that?
Sure. The executive committee has asked each of the standing committees to take a look at the directional plan that was adopted by the county board 2016. It contained 10 initiatives and highlighted 5 of them as priority initiatives. Items that the county wants to devote time and resources to. I've included a copy of the directional plan in your packet of materials. And each committee is asked to review the plan with an eye on those initiatives to discuss whether or not they're still pertinent. Are there some that we have achieved and are prepared to write a policy on and then iterate the things that we have done, the programs, the processes we've already adopted that implement those policies? Are there some that deserve some attention that we aren't ready to reach that point yet? And then are there new initiatives that we ought to consider for inclusion? By way of example, in 2018, we amended the plan to add broadband development as an initiative. It was not part of the original plan. So what you're asked to do today, we provided you a copy of the directional plan and highlighted two in particular that seem to fall under the purview of the Committee on Administration. One initiative is to develop a public outreach and information policy, and another is an initiative on supervisor education and communication. We asked you to give some thought to those in particular, but to all of them that are in the directional plan, and be prepared to talk about whether or not there are things we've already done and develop recommendations for future actions. Now, what I want to add to what I put in my staff report is we have made this presentation to a handful of the standing committees already, and there does seem to be a common theme that seems to be embraced by all of those committees so far, and that is the idea that staff go ahead and take a stab at drafting a policy and identifying a list of implementation projects or processes or steps that we've already taken, and bring those back to the committee as its homework. Bring it back in March in this case to the Committee on Administration. In the meantime, the homework for the individual members of the committees is to take a good look at this, and then if you have ideas, again, on things we've already done that you think implement one or more of the policy of the initiatives, or things that you think, initiatives you think aren't germane, or initiatives you think we've already achieved, and then finally, any new initiatives that you think we ought to consider. That between now and March, if you have those ideas, put them in an email, send them to me, and then staff will collect those together as part of its presentation to the Committee on Administration in March. If that's acceptable to this committee, we could take the same approach as we've already agreed to do for the ones we've made these presentations. That includes the neighbors, judiciary and law, PR&D, and facilities so far.
Thank you, Paul. Anyone have any comments or anything that you want to bring up at this point before we, like Paul says, take it under our wing to do a little homework?
Vaughn, Tim Lee now.
Go ahead, Tim.
So what exactly do you want us to just look at this, get familiar with the plan? Do you have an example here on how this might work? How this process might work?
Sure. So if you look at the plan, like I say, it's in your packet. I think it was on page 9. Hold on, let me find it myself. Yeah, no, page 8. Page 8 of the plan contains or sets out 10 issues, categories that we wanted to pay some attention to. These are the initiatives: health policy, environmental policy, broadband, demographic alignment, legislative program, neighbors viability, criminal justice, public information, supervisor education, and rec park. So let me give you an example. The legislative program. The idea on the initiative was, should we develop a legislative program that would identify and advocate key policy priorities? I think what we're going to say to the executive committee in March is that we can already articulate that policy, that something to the effect of DeKalb County should annually evaluate existing laws, rules, and regulations from the state and federal government that impact the efficiency with which we deliver services to our citizens, and advocate for any changes in the form of new laws, elimination of existing laws, or amendments to existing laws that will enhance the efficiency of that delivery. Underneath that, the implementation programs would be things that we're already doing. The legislative agenda is, I think, the heart of that legislative policy. And I think it's well embraced. We just did it on Monday with our legislators, and at least one of them, and that's an accomplishment, seemed fairly impressed with our approach. We also know that throughout the year, individual managers of departments who keep their finger on the pulse of their area of expertise will bring up if there's something pending in front of a body in Madison right now that would affect positively or negatively our delivery of services, and comes to their standing committee and says, we really ought to join in this effort, a resolution that says we're for it, we're against it, or we want to advocate for a change. Those things can happen throughout the year and then be incorporated. Between those two things alone, I think we have a legislative program. So I think that's one that we can say we can articulate the policy, we can list the approaches, and we can consider it something that we're already doing, working toward that overall goal. Again, go back to the first page, that pyramid. Those initiatives lead to, we hope, quality of life, board engagement, public engagement, sustainability, which ultimately leads to proactive government. So that's an illustration. What I would encourage you as committee members is to give the same sort of thought to each of these initiatives. Are there things we're already doing? If they occur to you that there are, list them. Encourage that we think about it. If there are ones that we should be doing that you're not aware of, hey, have we ever thought about doing X, Y, or Z? List that. And then finally, in thinking about the goal of proactive government, quality of life in Dunn County, are there new initiatives that we ought to take up? Under environmental, I can tell you, for instance, Facilities Committee was talking about how the environmental policy, water quality policy, shouldn't simply be concerned with our natural areas or the water quality, as tested in our residential wells and things like that. But how about our carbon footprint? Facilities is talking about forwarding a program to become carbon neutral by 2050. That's part of an environmental policy. So that sort of thinking is what we're encouraging you to do between now and the next meeting. And if you have those ideas, send them to me and we'll include them for presentation and for discussion in March.
All right, thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll move forward then. 6C is the FMLA policy update approval. And that again was included in your packet from Heather. Anyone have any questions on that? Or Paul or Heather, did you want to make any comments ahead of time here?
Heather?
I can speak briefly. So we had come, I believe, in the January meeting with a proposal to change the look back period for Family Medical Leave Administration because we were working on partnering with FMLA Source and they needed to know our policy effective March 1. So at the time we were still under the old policy. This was a really awkward timing thing because legally we had to provide a notice to the employees before we made the policy change. So the notices went out, the employees have been informed. The committee supported the action, and now we need to formally update the policy and roll that policy out to employees. We are set to begin that administration on March 1.
And this is, correct me if I'm wrong, Heather, this is an amendment to our employee handbook, but not to our personnel ordinance. So it is this committee that gets to make that decision.
Correct. That is correct. Thank you.
Yes, it's not compensation or fringe benefit. So the authority for approval lies with the committee.
I have a question.
Jim, go ahead.
We have changes made in two different colors. One is kind of a maroon, and is that changes we made last time? And then there's some changes made in a light blue. And they're marked 2/25/21. Am I reading this correctly?
You are. Two people worked on it. So one is Jenna and one is Heather.
One is employee maroon and one is employee blue.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I
Yes.
wasn't missing something. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Heather, I have a quick question.
Of course.
Simply now, under benefits, I think this is intermittent leave benefits underneath that heading. I noticed in here that in addition to paying the portion of the health insurance premiums, employees shall be required the full cost of continuing their life insurance, disability insurance, et cetera, during leave. Now, would this be, in a lot of cases, those extra benefits are some of the costs is picked up by the county? Would that no longer be the case then?
Not while they're on those particular leaves, correct?
Not on their leave, so they'd
Yep.
have to pay full freight then
Yes.
on those
Yes.
extra benefits then. All right, I just wanted clarification there. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Tim and Heather. Anyone else, any questions for Heather on this issue? We're going to make a decision on this. Hearing none, anyone care to make a motion on approving the changes as they're outlined here in print to the FMLA program that we administer here for our employees? Anyone care to make a motion to?
Supervisor
I
Story has
would
her hand up.
I make that
Supervisor
motion.
Story. Go ahead, Sheila.
I make that motion.
Thank you, Sheila. Appreciate it.
I'll
There's a
second
second.
Tim.
Tim Leon, Supervisor Lino, seconds. Any more questions or comments? David? You have
No.
anything? Okay. All right, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, we have a unanimous vote, it passes. From there, we're gonna go to out of title pay approval. That's also a Heather issue, I guess. You want to care to?
Well, that
just
ain't the half of the Heather issues, let me tell you.
Easy now.
Any questions about this information for Heather? Heather, go ahead.
Okay. So Carrie Quilling has been working out of her position, out of her class for a period of time. And this was due to COVID. So in getting ready to set up vaccination clinics, there's a lot of additional work that is required. And she has taken that, all of those duties on and has been doing a really wonderful job. Her background allowed her to be able to do that with very minimal training by KT. So KT came forward with the request to Paul, and then he was able to approve that for a period of time, but the committee per ordinance needs to extend that. So we're requesting that that be extended through the end of the year or at such point in time that we don't need to do mass clinics for those vaccinations. So of course, we definitely hope that that's sooner, but we're anticipating at least through the end of the year.
And it's being paid for with COVID funds that are being.
Oh,
provided to
yes.
us.
And you're right. As long as there's funding to pay for it, we're gonna.
Yes.
And the need is there will continue. Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Any questions or comments on this issue? Hearing none, I would need a motion to approve that we go ahead and keep Carrie at this position until she's no longer needed there.
I'll make the motion, John Calabrese.
Okay, John. Thank you, John.
I'll second Tim Leno.
Okay, seconded by Supervisor Leno. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Central Services Cost Allocation Plan Services Contract Approval. Is this one that Keith is going to cover?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
This is a contract for services that the county's had in place for many years. and really boil down on it is with a number of our federal and state grants, in order for us to claim administrative support against those grants, we have to have a cost allocation plan to more or less substantiate or back that up. And it also pertains to other state allocations like for children's services. So this is one of those things that we need to do. And because it is a certain expertise, it's good to have an outside contractor do it. So the county has contracted for years for this. Our most recent contract that was awarded in 2013 and for a 5-year term with 2-year or 2 1-year extensions expired at the end of 2020. So early this year, we went out for bid through the RFP process. And in my memo, you can see the scorings of those. And the incumbent firm did score the best. And I guess one benefit there too is that their price proposal came in lower than what we paid last year. So that was their cost proposal, which was ranked separately and at the end. We had 2 really strong firms, and there's 2 main firms doing this in the state of Wisconsin, DSN and Maximus. They have the overwhelming majority of counties in the state that they do this for. And both are reputable within the state, but DSN has some very strong advantages. And after we went through the review process of the proposals, it pointed out that DSN is doing this for at least 40, if not more, counties in the state of Wisconsin. Strong level of expertise and understanding of Dunn County already, and using SAP to pull the information. They're also very well known and respected with the state of Wisconsin, which is important because the state many times is the pass-through on these federal programs, as well as like for children's services. They work closely with them and as far as how to report that works for the state of Wisconsin. So we don't have a whole lot of back and forth. And then, of course, their cost was the lowest and did come down from their last year's proposal, or last year's contract. So it's our recommendation that you approve the RFP proposal from DSN as the winning proposal and for these services effective immediately and authorize execution of a contract after Nick's had a chance to review the contract.
Okay. All right, so everyone understand that we will be approving the recommendation and that will be subject to final approval by the contract itself, at least by our corp counsel. Any questions at this point? If not, we can make a motion to approve.
I so move. Tripp.
Thank you, Supervisor Tripp. There's a second?
Tim Leno,
I'll second.
second.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Tim seconds. Jim made the motion. Any questions or comments at this point? Okay, if not, we'll go ahead with our the recommendation for DSN. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The next item is SAP Support Services Contract, an extension to approval for the Phoenix Business Incorporated. Keith or Paul or both, who's going to address this one?
Keith.
I will, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Keith.
Included in your packet again was another memo. This one a little more lengthy, kind of laying out the timeline of services. But without getting into all the details of the history, you could read that. But basically where it is the 3-year contract that we had with Phoenix Business Incorporated is set to expire in April. And so we discussed it internally to see whether it warranted going out for bid and to see if there was really a need. And the determination was no. Bottom line is they've really only been providing direct support for us for just over 18 months. because it took us, as I explained in my memo, it took almost a year and a half to in the partnership with the prior consultants. So without getting into that whole history, we've only been working with them for a year and a half, but I can tell you it has been a very successful partnership. There's always room for improvement with everything, but it has really been successful. They're performing in the way I would envision a good consultant, and my experience has been with good consultants is somebody that works with you to train you, to show you how to do it where it makes sense, and is actually actively trying to do that. They look for every opportunity because they know the history. That's been their business approach. That's what I believe sold the county. The RFP and the contract was awarded just prior to my starting with the county in March of 18, but they have delivered, and it's resulted in significant improvements for us. It's also in resolving a number of issues, as I alluded to earlier with Supervisor Lino's questions about fixed assets. We've had a lot of items to fix. Payroll was a huge area. Human resources, we've had to work on several things. Financial reporting, the information was all good. It's just a number of processes and things weren't necessarily set up the most efficient or very well. So they've also helped us reduce our annual cost from $1 million in budgeted for 2018 down to, I think this year's budget was under $400,000 or thereabouts. So, I mean, that's very notable, and that's getting closer to the range that we would expect to see for a product like this for us. So with all of that in mind, I approached our lead for the project over there and asked them to provide a 3 and a 5 year renewal option, because sometimes you can, if you're willing to sign on for a 5-year term, they'll give you different pricing or better pricing. Even though we're gun shy of going too long, because the initial contract was 10 years and we know what happened there. And it would have had to have been very substantial for me to even recommend that. But in this case, there was really no financial benefit to go out 6 years. We still, even in their 3-year proposal, have the opportunity to extend for another 3-year term, and they've already committed their hourly rates. Then the only other adjustment that they're proposing, and we agree with it, is to remove hosting services. Because as we went through the transition from the prior consultant, which I won't name, we decided to bring it in-house, because one of the lessons learned, there are good times and places to put things on the cloud and have them hosted, but there's times where it can work against you. And besides the $500,000 price tag that we had annually for having it hosted, where we could buy all the equipment for 1 year and have it last for 5 years for the same price of $500,000, we have control of the system and the data. And that really was a struggle with transition. So the decision was made to bring the hosting in-house. The IT team stepped up and could do it, and it's really paid off for us. We have control now of our user management, licensing, things like that. So so they're proposing to remove that language from the original contract, and we agree with that. It's simply recognizing the fact that we're not utilizing those services of them, nor have we paid for those. It was really, if we needed it, they would do it. So there's no point in including it. The county made the investment a year and a half ago. So with that, it's our recommendation that you approve the 3-year contract extension, and I have both proposals in here that were provided by them. So with that, I'll turn it over to the committee.
You're muted, Mr. Chair. You're muted, Vaughn.
There we go. Shut myself off and on. Okay. Question is, Keith, so there's 2 sections here, and I see one says in-house. So in other words, that is if they actually send their staff here to work with us, and the first one is remotely. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Now,
Anyone else have-
the only time we've had them on site was at the initial implementation planning, and that initial implementation, because that's such a critical time, you need somebody here to be able to jump in and address things immediately versus being in India or Florida or otherwise.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions for Keith or for Paul on this?
Have these contracts been vetted by Nick?
No, this would be the same thing as the other one. This one's more of an extension, but yes, before it would be signed, it would have to be reviewed by Corporation Counsel.
Okay. Mhm.
Pretty basic.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, if not, again, this is being recommended by our staff. So I'd like to make a motion that we go ahead and get a contract established with Phoenix for a 3-year period of time.
I would second that, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
I'm sorry,
Made
who
it.
moved?
who moved first?
I thought he did.
No,
The way he
he was
stated it,
asking.
it sounded like he did. Otherwise, if not, I'll go ahead and move.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Sheila. Okay,
Give me a second.
okay, motion by Sheila.
I'll
Seconded
second.
by
Tim
Tim
Lino.
again. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate that. All those in favor, say aye.
I,
Aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Audit of vouchers. Any questions on the vouchers as they were presented in our packet of information?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Sheila. Sorry, thank you.
the only thing that really stood out to me was all of the car repairs going on with the patrol vehicles. Did we have a multiple amount of damage reports as a result of hitting deer or something that has caused all this damage to these cars, or how many cars does it involve?
Keith, do we know the answer on that one?
No, unfortunately, I don't. If I'm looking through, are you referring to like the Northtown Ford? There's a number of payments
There were
there.
some that looked like just probably they were an oil change, but there were some that were more major, and it also included, not just Northtown, but places that would maybe be doing painting or repairing of vendors or something.
I am aware that they had one vehicle that had substantial damage late last year that was being repaired. That was part of their carry forward request to Judicial and Law Committee earlier this week from 2020. So some of these are invoices that are coming through. I just saw one earlier this week for one of the body shops.
Are any of these leased vehicles?
No.
No,
No.
not for patrol.
Okay.
Supervisor
Mr.
Chuck had his
Chair,
hand
if I
up. Yep.
Go ahead. Who was that?
The sheriff did report a number of deer collisions recently, and I don't know if it's, I don't know, time of year or what. So that, I think, explains at least part of it.
I like to tease them that they go hunting for deer with their squads, and I wish they wouldn't do that.
Maybe we need to equip the front of the squads with one of those,
Airbags?
well, those, what do they call it?
Deer rack.
Deer guards?
Yeah, cow catchers.
Actually, they do have them. Yeah, cow catchers. They actually do have them, and that doesn't stop.
They slip right in between them.
We're talking open range now out west. Open range on deer.
Okay. Any other questions? Sheila, did you have some more?
No, that was pretty much it. I mean, I saw a lot of vendors that I didn't necessarily recognize, but I didn't think there was anything else that really stood out. It was mostly just that what's going on with our patrol vehicles.
Thank you, Sheila. Anyone else? Tim.
Vaughn, I have a question. In the section 1270, probably a little bit below the Northtown situation, I'm seeing medical services for $19,100. Just wondering, are we having more of a breakout? Is this COVID related?
Is that the medical services advanced correctional healthcare?
Correct.
Oh, no, that's in jail.
Yeah, that's under jail.
Yeah. I assume that would be some of the additional healthcare work they've had to do. I know they've had some medical issues there related to COVID. I don't know if this specifically is tied to that, but they have had some items there. And I'll follow up with I'll look in the invoices and get you something via email, or I'll contact the sheriff's office.
That'll be fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I guess I would wonder if any of that has to do with any state employees any criminals that we've got in our jails that are under that contract, where we might have to pay for some medical care.
Right. Yeah, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Supervisor Story and Tripp, if, the state inmates, actually, we have a few more obligations with them, don't we?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, so this could be related to that. I'll do some research on those and get back to the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Anyone else? Okay. Hearing none, would someone care to make a motion? The total of our vouchers are $603,295.50.
I'll make a motion to.
Okay, John. So
All right.
moved. Tim, second. All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. They are approved. Okay, item 7 on our agenda, consideration for reports, resolutions, and ordinances of the county board from this committee on administration. And we have an ordinance amending the county code of ordinances, section 5.1.8G, personal administration regarding county board confirmation of the county manager's appointments. And so we're looking for a change here to take place. Who wants to address that one for us?
I can, Mr. Chair.
Okay, go ahead.
The proposed amendment to this portion of the Code of Ordinances is to strike a single sentence that requires any appointment by the county manager requires confirmation by the county board. It's a paragraph that deals with responsibilities of the county manager to appoint and supervise department heads, except those that are elected, or except where statutes provide appointment is made by elected officers, the board. And sometimes it causes a little confusion because this provision deals specifically with department heads and not others, division heads. For instance, Dan Dunbar, who's listening intently and taking notes like a maniac, is a division head that would not under this paragraph require county board approval. By contrast, Josie LaLiberty, whom we hired 4 months ago, is a department head and did require county board approval. In talking it over with both our HR director and corporation counsel, it seemed that this is a somewhat superfluous requirement of county board approval when you have a manager who's responsible for hiring these individuals, the ones that aren't elected and aren't already subject to county board approval. And the bottom line observation is that if the county board has a problem with a hire, the problem is really with the county manager, not the person being hired. And so in order to streamline the process and to eliminate the confusion that sometimes occurs, we've had a spate of hires at the management level, but then we go through periods of time when we don't, and it causes confusion. To eliminate that confusion, after due consideration, staff is proposing this amendment.
Okay. Anyone have any questions or concerns? Okay.
Mr. Chair.
I read it. Go ahead, Mr. Supervisor Tripp.
I understand the rationale behind this, but occasionally we get criticized for the county board turning over too much responsibility to staff. And so I have a couple of questions. Your distinction between the department head and division head, for one thing, strikes me as being a little bit, well, it's not arbitrary, but the distinction is not clearly understood either, I don't believe. And if we're going to do anything in this regard, maybe we ought to address that. Your statement that if the county manager appoints people that the board doesn't like, the real issue is with the county manager. And I understand and agree with that as well. But I don't think that gets to, I don't think that addresses what could be an issue if the county manager does appoint somebody that the board does not approve of. I'm not opposed to this. As a matter of fact, I think we ought to clean up this language a little bit. But I don't know that we should simply get rid of the requirement of approval by the county board. I don't know what I'd suggest as an alternative. I don't have a suggestion. All I know is that it makes me just a little bit nervous about well, I was going to say the appearance, but frankly, I'm old enough, I don't really care what I look like anymore. That's pretty obvious. But I maybe it is the appearance. Is there a way that we could address this that would maintain the responsibility for the county board to make reasonable approvals while clarifying the difference between divisions and departments, and frankly, not getting in the way of the county manager being able to do the job that we hired him to do? And I apologize for not being at all clear on this, but it's not clear in my own mind, so I have difficulty expressing it as well.
So if I may, a couple of responses. Perhaps part of your concern, it can be alleviated by the recognition of the process that we do follow for hiring managers, which always involves reaching out to the chair of the standing committee that has oversight for that department or division and inviting them to be part of the interview team, and deferring to them if in fact they want the top candidates to be in front of the entire committee for review and recommendation. So we had that case here recently with our new county conservationist, Chase Cummings, where Tom Quinn, board supervisor and chair of PR&D, participated in the initial set of interviews. I think there were 5 candidates. We identified that the interview panel identified the top 2 candidates, and then Tom, as chair of PR&D, requested those top 2 come and talk to the full committee, which then rendered a recommendation back to me. And of course, that's who we ended up hiring. Contrast this with, and I don't mean to pick on Dan, but he ought to get used to it. Contrast with Dan, where Vaughn, as chair of Committee on Administration, sat in on the interviews and did not feel it was necessary to bring it in front of the top candidates or top 2 in front of the entire committee. That call, we think is appropriate to be the call of the chair of the standing committee. And I don't have a problem with either approach. But in both cases, it counters the argument of any claim of the county board abrogating its responsibilities vis-a-vis the hiring of these managers, because there's involvement by the supervisors who are best in the position to evaluate and take part in those hiring processes. The second point I would make in response to your observation, there is a distinction already between a department head and a division head. It's in our organizational scheme. So IT, for instance, is a division of the administration department. The language that exists in the county code right now specifies department heads, and it's a plain language interpretation. Nick could probably give us a treatise on plain language. It is a plain language interpretation that this applies to department heads and not to those who are not department heads. So that distinction's already there. If it was meant to apply to everybody in a managerial position, we would have to be far clearer about what we mean is that anybody who exercises any supervisory authority whatsoever over any other employee, in which case we're going to substantially increase the number of persons that would be subject, if we leave this provision in, to approval by the county board. I would not recommend it. I think it's unnecessary, and that's the bottom line, is in terms of streamlining the efficiency of this process. We feel that the supervisors who are in the best position to participate in those hiring processes already do so. And again, if there's a problem that with the decisions that are being made, the real problem is that the county board has with the judgment, if you will, of the county manager, rather than the individuals who are being hired. Final thing I'll observe is, of course, everybody, except for elected officials, who works for the county works at the will of the county board. And any serious problem that the county board has with any employee is subject to that provision as well.
And I will build on that and just say, because I'm not Paul's lawyer, I'm the county's lawyer. I don't disagree with what he said. But in answer to your question, Supervisor Tripp, it really wouldn't take too much editing at all to change it so that it would apply to both division heads and department heads. I think this is a vestige of back long ago, the county board, we've had an administrative coordinator since I've been here, and well before that. And the authority and responsibility of the administrative coordinator is not very well defined in statute. The purpose of that, I believe, is so that individual county boards can craft what they want their administrative coordinator to do, and then retain the things that the county board wants to keep for itself. And that's what happened here in Dunn County. Dunn County created a county manager position. And it's what I always tell others is that it's an administrative coordinator with superpowers. And so there's a lot of authority and responsibility that's defined in the ordinance, but the county board keeps to itself the things that aren't delegated in that ordinance. And so I think this came before we had division heads, the departments, zoning and planning and solid waste and IT. At one time, they were all standalone departments within the county, and they've been consolidated. And I think some of this language is just left behind. I don't disagree at all with Paul, though, that I think the appointment of the employee, the authority to appoint, lies with the county manager. And so the county board's role in it is to simply confirm the appointment. And from a legal standpoint, once the county manager has made a job offer, if you don't like the candidate to whom the offer was extended, I'm going to tell you to keep it to yourself, because there's probably no good to come from going anywhere with that. And so I think as a practical matter, it really is a very almost ceremonial thing. I don't think it has a real substantial impact on oversight. I think Paul's right. There's participation in the interviewing and vetting of candidates. In fact, one of the things that we're working on now with HR and with county manager is to develop some kind of like a menu of different approaches to interviewing, so that we have some consistency and a little creativity put down on paper in advance, so that we can, move forward when we need to fill a position. We can just, kind of look at the menu, pick a good model for interviewing, and vetting a candidate, and then and moving forward. So I think there's some history there that it was my sense when I was here. I wasn't directly involved in it, but my sense when I was here was that there was a kind of a nervous reluctance to turn everything over. And maybe that was a good thing, maybe it wasn't, I don't know, and I'm not judging. I just think it doesn't serve a real solid purpose, because the authority to appoint it lies with the county manager. And once that act is done, that triggers all the legal things that come from a human resources and employment law standpoint. So it's really kind of a ceremonial thing. On the other hand, as I don't think it hurts either. It just creates a little bit of extra work, and we got to make sure we bring stuff into the county board for that. If you'll recall, we forgot about it when Josie was appointed. So she was actually appointed and working in her position for a couple of months before the county board confirmed her appointment.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
would it have anything to do with the power to evaluate or to fire an individual?
No.
No.
Okay. It's just, but it might have something to do with evaluating the county manager during evaluation if the power is solely his and.
Yeah, and that's something that happens anyway. If your county manager hires a bunch of incompetents and malcontents, and seems to be, through lack of judgment, fully destroying the organization, that's certainly going to come out in the annual evaluation.
Mr. Chair, a question?
Go ahead, John Calabrese. Go ahead.
Could it say in this section, and maybe it says it somewhere else, that the any appointment by the county manager under this paragraph requires confirmation by, like you said, that Chairman Headland of the administration committee met for Dan's position, and then for the other committees as well? Could that language say that it requires confirmation by the committee that it pertains to?
By the standing committee with oversight of the department?
Yeah. Something like that.
It could. It can say that. That essentially would make it an action item. Right now, of course, we report. So we already put it on the agenda simply as a report. We hired Dan. It could become, in that case, it would become an action item, by the committee alone to, as a confirmation. It's still, as Nick puts it, somewhat ceremonial, but it's not, it's an idea. If you still feel it would, along the lines of Supervisor Tripp's observation, that having it in our code of ordinances sends the overt signal that the county board is involved in these sorts of things and it's not entirely handed over the responsibility to staff.
Yeah, and since it's happening anyway, then maybe if it said it in there, I think it is, and maybe it's just looking at it seems maybe what Supervisor Tripp is saying, that it just looks a little stark to see that sentence completely crossed out.
Another option that you may want to consider would be to, in order to maintain the connection between the county manager's appointments and appointment authority and the county board's knowledge, Paul brings stuff to the committees and to the county board and reports things. But there'd be, you could just put a requirement in there that the county manager, has to report all appointments to the county board. That keeps that connection there. I mean, the ordinances are they don't have allegiance to any purpose. They're just written so that anybody who's here at any time can follow them. So, if you have a county manager who's conscientious, they aren't really being shackled by the ordinance. They're just doing what they think is their job. But you could have an ordinance provision that requires it so that oversight and connection is still there. And, then it applies universally to all county managers who fill the county manager position in Dunn County.
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Tripp, go ahead.
I think you've convinced me that the requirement for approval by the county board does not probably belong in the ordinances. Maybe what we need is a policy. And Paul or Nick, one of the two of you mentioned development of a menu that would include involvement of the standing committees at some level, reporting by the county manager, those kinds of things. And if it were in policy, it would make it a more obviously direct responsibility for the county manager to function in a way that either the standing committees and or the county board has knowledge of and an opportunity to either approve or disapprove of. And I think Supervisor Calabrese had it right. Maybe it's just a stark taking it out of there that has me kind of just uncomfortable. So I will support the motion to remove the language from the ordinance, but encourage development of a policy that outlines, as somebody mentioned, a menu of potential opportunities to involve standing committees in the county board during the hiring process.
If I may, Mr. Chair, if we take that approach, which I don't object to, my recommendation would be that we not act on this change to the County Code of Ordinances until we have what Nick and Heather have been working on in terms of the hiring process fleshed out. I don't know that it results in a change to our employee handbook or our personnel ordinance, but it certainly would come out in the form of a policy, which would be distributed to all of our departments and would come through the Committee on Administration, or at least to be reported to this committee. So perhaps when we have that in hand, it would lend even further credence to the notion of striking this particular line from the County Code of Ordinances, as opposed to doing one and then the other.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, I do too. And I, in the policy, I think something, Nick and Paul, that would pertain to it would be recommended, or if we want to make it mandatory, that either the committee chair or an appointed member of the committee by the chair be involved in, like you have been doing, in the interview process.
That's exactly what we're working on. What Nick meant, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, what he meant by the menu, that, at the very least, the chair of the standing committee with oversight is involved, but that chair has that discretion to bring either top two candidates or perhaps all the candidates in front of the full committee at their discretion. That kind of thing is what would be laid out in the menu of options, and departments would understand, look, pick one of these in working with your committee chair.
I think that's about right.
Well, I like that. Then we do, Nick, is the thing to do is just to table this issue, or do we need to do that?
I don't think.
Okay. Go ahead.
I don't think you need to table it if it's the consensus of the members of the committee that you don't want to move it forward at this point. I don't think you need to.
Just take no action.
Yeah, just no action taken.
Okay.
I mean, unless someone objects if someone objects, they should make a motion to bring it up to the board. Otherwise, I think you can just let it relax and no action taken.
Given it was just a discussion item at this point, because we didn't have it on the table as a motion, that would make it so
Right.
that we just, yeah.
Yeah,
There's been no motion made, right?
Right.
Correct.
No motion made. Okay. Anything else then? Any other comments that you want to,
Just that I really do appreciate the thought that this committee is giving on this point. And I want to assure you, this is not that any of you are thinking, this is in no way an effort by your county manager to slowly gather power. This has to do with efficiency of what we're doing. And the work that, to tell you the truth, the work that Nick and Heather are doing on clarifying our hiring process is of even greater value. So.
I agree. I like that they're going forward with that. I think it's pretty necessary, especially in the world of lawsuits and things that can come out of mistakes you can make in that process. Okay. That, if you look at your agenda, takes us down to announcements, and the announcement is the next meeting date is March 25th, 2021, and again at 3:30 p.m. in the afternoon. Anyone else have an announcement that pertains to our agenda? Okay, hearing none, we're going to adjourn. Thank you all for coming. Thanks for all the great comments and questions.